Hey guys, Steph Sarmo. I'll just wait till a couple of you guys get on at least. Today we're going to go over today's March 7th trial, the second trial here in Oregon. Today we went over the last two witnesses for prosecution, and then they had jury instruction as well as closing arguments after that, and they were able to complete all those tasks. Tomorrow the jury begins to deliberate at 9 a.m. as well as they begin the bench trial without a jury, of course. So that begins, and I'm imagining there's going to be motions for testimony that will be either submitted or challenged and submitted, and then there's the possibility of requesting for more time. I don't know that. I don't know that for sure or anything, but it's just common sense that someone would petition the court for a little bit more time for preparation with all that's been on their plates with the actual jury trial. So we'll see where that goes, guys. So just to give you guys that first update, what to expect for tomorrow. Today, right off the bat, they were still challenging with Rule 403 the defense regarding the BLM agent and the FBI agent testimony on how they felt they were impeded to complete their job based off of rumors that were also erroneous information. And as you might know, they had instructed their employees not to go back to work as some of the points in contention for the defense to challenge. Not only challenge this rule with 403 because it's redundant, but and accumulative, as they keep calling it in court, but also because of some very specific reasons. And they partially got what they wanted of the judge, but she partially ruled in favor for the prosecution, of course, as well. So what happened was she granted it, and this is her word, she granted it in part. She overruled the objection because of the accumulation, but instead requested that specific rumors and erroneous information about a kidnapping or a plan to kidnap somebody without evidence of that cannot go before the jury. They can discuss specifically that they were in fear, they being the BLM agents or the FBI agent, basically, just like they have done through this whole trial, basing their fear off circumstantial information and the news media and things like that. But they're allowed to talk about that they were in fear and where that fear derived from in part, but not to detailed information that was unproven, like a potential plan that was potentially hatched without names or knowing anyone, potentially hatched to kidnap an agent or BLM agent or a wildlife personnel employee. So with that, she just went on to allow both the prosecution's witnesses to go forward, just not allowed to get into the weeds about things that were erroneous or rumors. That's all. Let's see here. So moving on with Duane Ehmer, went into a still photo that was presented from the prosecution stating that it shows evidence that he was part of a security team because he had a radio and an earbud, and that he was speaking into the earbud. Well, when they showed that photo, the earbud was in his hand like so, not up here. And the radio that was circled in blue on the screen was on another person about 4 feet in front of him, to his right. To his right, about 4 feet in front of him. That's the radio was attached to another man's hip. That's the radio. And the earbud could have been his hearing aid. I don't know if everybody out there knows, but he does wear hearing aids. So, and I don't remember them all having earbuds. I don't remember any earbuds when I was there. I'd have to ask. Maybe I should ask. But I never saw earbuds when I was there. I saw some radios. And I don't think that meant you were on a security team because, well, I got to get on the radio a couple times too and tell people, come on down here, I want to interview you. So it was actually kind of funny because I had that memory. I was like, well, I was on the radio, so does that mean I'm guilty of being on a security team now? According to Ethan Knight's standards, I'm guilty of sin, let me tell you. According to him, not according to me. And nobody's guilty of the crimes that they're charging them with. So the evidence exhibit 1267 was an interview with Pete Santilli and Duane Ehmer. It was really good to hear that, by the way. So if Deb Jordan hears this, there was a part of that interview where you can hear my voice actually at the very end say, "Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt your interview," because I was about to tell Pete Santilli something. I had just seen Ammon, was about to tell him about my meeting with Ammon. Anyway, I was just remembering that, and I had kind of run, not realizing the camera was on and everything. I had said that. I heard my own voice and was like, ooh, that's weird. But what was really cool about that was, once again, as always in Pete Santilli fashion and style, he was asking all the questions about what we didn't know. Nobody knew Duane. Duane Ehmer didn't start there in the very beginning. He came based off of news and information. And in this interview, you can see that, I mean, there's no evidence of anything, of any crime. You can see that this is just a guy, a concerned citizen, that is watching the news, reading through the rhetoric and bullshit, and realizes something's wrong, but I want to go check it out for myself. You know, the news is saying these guys are terrorists and terrible people, but I want to go see for myself what's really going on. And so he came, and then he talked to Pete about being a Marine. He talked to Pete about what he did, in his life and his horse. And he talked to Pete about what he had already been observing there. And he said, these are a bunch of really good people. And I feel really safe here, and I really like it here. I really like the education and message that they're putting out. So, and I'm just paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what the prosecution put out for evidence on Duane Ehmer today. This is what I'm seeing throughout the whole thing. The evidence is just stuff that I've already seen or heard of before, or even myself had done interviews, and I'm just looking at it like, why would terrorists transparently tell everybody who they are, what they're doing, if they're doing evil and conniving, nefarious acts? They would not get on camera for all of Facebook or other social media outlets, multiple social media outlets, to see. They would be working in the dark, secretly. So it's cracking me up watching this circus. It's really terrible. Anyway, so the rebuttal that the prosecution had for witness Chad Charges, or I'm sorry, the defense, he said that Chad Charges was one of the BLM agent himself, and he was the employer of all the other agents that he ordered to not come to work in December, which, remember, that was before January 2nd. So he had already ordered everybody not to come to work in December, and he based his reasoning off of, because he was in fear for his own safety and his employees, because he knew that these militia folks were coming into his town, and he feared for his personal safety and there, so he gave everybody all this time off of work because he felt that they were all in danger before the occupation ever happened. That's his reasoning. He said he always kept loaded guns at every door at his house. He said that he couldn't allow his children to come visit him during Christmas because he was afraid for their safety coming into his town. He said that the news was showing, armed guards at the refuge, and that was feeding his fear. And again, when you're looking at a conspiracy to impede them, just because a second source is showing you a narrative with rhetoric, oh, look at these men with guns, whom, by the way, every picture we've all ever seen with them with guns, they're not pointing them at anybody. They're usually just posing, if that, or just resting. It's in the rest position at all times. Every weapon I've ever seen was always at the rest position, meaning it's their Second Amendment, and a lot of them holstered. So not even at the rest position, a lot of them holstered. So he just sees these photos and decides that that's reasonable to be fearful. In Harney County, in a town where pretty much everybody there, liberal or Republican, not every single person, but many people consistently carry weapons or have weapons in their vehicles at all times. So he feels that that was enough reason to be that reasonably fearful over what the news was saying. And nobody had even gone to the Hammond rally yet. The Hammond rally hadn't even happened yet. He said that he was receiving threats that were linked from the occupiers. You know, there was an objection from the defense on that, but that was denied. He said, and of course they were saying that was hearsay. You know, their objection was because that's hearsay. He said there were threats caused him to decide to remove all his employees from the premises. So it wasn't just the news. He said there were threats. Again, this was hearsay, but he never described what those threats were. He did not, well, and again, they weren't going to allow, if it had to do with the hostage threats and rumor, they weren't going to let that through, especially since it's hearsay or rumor or erroneous information. And it was never, ever proven. And no one ever went to his door. He was asked by the defense, has anybody ever, any of the occupiers or militia ever been to your home or at your door? And he said, nope, no one came to his door. And he said he left already prior to January 2nd. He admitted that he had everybody leave prior to that. And they asked about the guns being placed in front of his door. And he said that he placed those guns in front of his door, in front of every door prior to January 2nd. Prior to the occupation, just because he was seeing on the news that the militia is walking around town. The militia, that legal entity and last line of defense for our nation, is putting people in fear of their lives when they're there to protect them. But that's the narrative that a lot of the media want the general populace to believe now. They're undermining and discrediting the militia and the meaning and the very definition and the oath and mission that every militia swears to. And instead of speaking to that, they're re-educating or indoctrinating our people, the general public, to fear the militia now. Interesting takeaway for me, by the way, which I'm sure we've all been in some part, those of us like-minded and understand, those of us educated about the militia have all been thinking for quite a while now as we watch the news degrade and undermine the militia left and right. And that's what you are doing, mainstream media. You are degrading and undermining your last line of defense, the people that are willing to fight for your freedom of speech and your rights, your God-given rights. You're undermining them. And now it's leaking into our court system because of the media narrative bullshit. So now it's almost becoming okay and sounding like it's lawful to undermine the militia. So Linda Beck, she takes a stand next. She took leave due to visits from the militia too. So pretty much she almost said the same thing. Fearing for her safety and safety of her employees, was notified by text from a friend in Wisconsin. So she didn't even know the militia was in town on her own. She just was notified from a friend in Wisconsin. She received a text, "Are you okay?" And because of that, and then the friend just, gave her some news links and things. I'm assuming, she didn't get into details, but I'm assuming the friend notified her, meaning gave her information that the militia's in town. She decided, I better take vacation now because I can't possibly go to work with the militia in town who's not anywhere near my refuge. Nobody knows that. This is before January 2nd. Remember that. These testimonies are before. That's a very important piece of this. That they're making these decisions before January 2nd to leave a specific location. The refuge, employees, feel so unsafe to be at the refuge for some reason prior to January 2nd. That they're already not going to work. So anyway, there were lots of pictures, he said, when she looked at the news with people with guns. She felt scared and violated. So if you have a weapon on you, if I carry my piece on me right now and walk out that front door and walk around, then people are going to feel reasonably fearful and scared and violated. Is that really reasonable? Aren't guns quite normal, especially in towns like Harney County or Burns itself specifically? So she feels that she has a reason to be fearful because of the sight of guns on men. And women, by the way. And she felt violated. She used the word violated. All right. So she was told that Ammon brought her name up January 7th. Again, she learned this from a friend in a text. That her name was in a news article, and that Ryan Bundy had mentioned her. There was an objection that was, of course, overruled. And she saw the photos again with men with guns, and she didn't, she felt even further scared that she was being discussed because of her employment there. But this is later now, January 7th. She had already made the decision to go on vacation and not go to work before that. So, okay. She said she had to lock her front gate. She felt that unknown people were watching us. She said the word us. So I don't know who us is. Maybe some other family members in her home. She said that unknown people were watching us. Again, these are all unfounded statements. These are statements people are making. I thought I saw an informant staring at me today, driving by the courthouse and looking at me. One of the known informants that contacted me last night. So, and then I see the face. So what does that mean? Should I be running around this town now in fear? How should I react? I may be wrong. May not be him. I'm just giving my own personal example because I listen to these people and I don't get these gross exaggerations and how they can take this. It's a comical situation for me to watch these people take the stand, grossly exaggerate as if it's evidence. It's not even fitting the definition of circumstantial. It's beyond hearsay, and it should be completely stricken. Shouldn't even be allowed, but whatever. She said she didn't feel like it was a vacation. And when she took her, remember I told you she took her vacation. She didn't feel like she was on vacation at all. She felt like she was in a nightmare. That her life was not of her own any longer. Now remember, she never went to the refuge. She never encountered any of these people. But somehow her life had been ripped away from her, not of her own anymore. So, gross exaggerations once again, but there you go. I really don't think any of these people were in fear of anything. They're still receiving a paycheck. They were making these decisions before January 2nd based off of photos, news articles, and erroneous rumors and hearsay, and somebody sitting out in my street at my front yard staring at me for an unknown period of time. No police reports were discussed, so it wasn't like she filed a police report about what she was, seeing or anything like that. I'm just making some other points because they weren't made in court, and that frustrates me. But whatever. We're going through a court of injustice instead of a court with justice. So that's the way that goes. Agent Ronnie Walker. He's the video expert on Duane Ehmer. He observed Duane using the earbud and the radio that was on another man, by the way. So he testified to that. That's where the blue circle, he's the one that circled. Sorry guys, keep getting phone calls. He's the one that made the circle in blue on the picture, the still photo of Duane Ehmer, and the radio was on some other man's hip, and that was about 4 feet in front of, I'm guesstimating, but about 4 feet in front of Duane Ehmer to his right. And the supposed object in his hand that he was holding, he wasn't holding to his ear, and even if he was, it could be his own hearing aids, but he was holding something in his hand. For all I know, it was an iPhone, part of an iPhone speaker. Maybe he wanted to listen to some music. I don't know. I mean, they're making a lot of assumptions off that photo and putting Agent Ronnie Walker on, the professional, to collaborate that. He said on January 9th, 2016, there was a broadcast at the OPB website between, this is the interview between John how do you pronounce his last name again? Saparvera? Sepulveda. And then Ryan Bundy. Was a great interview. Ryan says this office facilitates. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So Ryan is explaining in that how the office, the BLM office itself, when he was asked the question, not why he was there, but, does he feel like he can be impeding government officials or government employees? And Ryan said, look, this office facilitates the orders, the very orders that basically resulted, I'm paraphrasing, basically resulting the jailing of the Hammonds. This is the place where these decisions ultimately were made. And there's a history here that's, terrorizing the people of Harney County. And that needs to stop. And we're here to make sure that things change for the people, for all people. And he went into that education and they're using that, they think that's evidence of more than a peaceful protest, of some sort of conspiracy to impede the BLM agents or employees of a federal facility. So really weak arguments, even with their witnesses. Once again laughable. I wasn't really impressed with anything Ronnie Walker said on the stand. We went on to jury instructions. What's important out of jury instructions? The judge had said even anything. Okay, so when she was reading some of the jury instructions, she was going over a list of things, what they should be weighing and evaluating, basically, and what's important to the facts, okay? Whether they agree with the law or not, but they need to be weighing these things. So there shouldn't be any influence, likes or dislikes or prejudices or biases. Even if they'd seen any of those biases from anybody taking the stand, witnesses or attorneys, she even included herself, which, I almost wanted to stand up and applause for that one, because I have seen her bias back in the day before the first trial. There was a much stronger amount of bias back in those days. And you guys, some of the audience here might remember how I spoke to that and how I brought up the code of conduct of ethics of a judge, practicing from a bench, some things that I saw her specifically violating over and over and over again. So I thought it was funny seeing a few things that remind me of her bias, more subtle now. But if she had made any statements, maybe admonished the defense team on several occasions inappropriately, in our opinion, maybe any of those things can look like a bias. She is basically instructing the jury that even anything she has stated, anything at all, should not be weighed in or evaluated for them to convict or not convict. I could have applauded. I'm just looking to see. There's a lot of instruction for the jury. The burden of proof is definitely on the government. Facts are not. Okay, so facts that are not applied to specific defendants, and this is important. Facts that are not applied to specific defendants. The four that are there: Jason Patrick, Jake Ryan, Darryl Thorn, and Duane Ehmer. There were a lot of hearsay and maybe circumstantial facts that the prosecution was trying to present that were not even specific to any of the defendants at all. So I highlighted that to share with you guys because I think it's very imperative that this sinks into the minds of the jury. I'm very hopeful that the jury really heard that instruction, because basically the entire argument from the prosecution is a lot of BS that has nothing to do with the actual defendants during this second trial that are sitting there right now. A lot of things that were brought up were videos of others speaking, others' conduct and words, others' behavior and actions, others' photos with weapons posing. Not all of, much of it had nothing to do with the defendants at all today or yesterday. So she went over reasonable doubt. It's got to be based off evidence. It can't be speculative. That's important because most everything was speculative. She talked about it in the case of Blaine Cooper, that she brought this up herself. It is very plausible that there may be some favorable treatment that could have influenced his testimony. So she said, I would advise greater caution. She brought that up herself. I would advise greater caution with that too, because yeah, his testimony, I didn't get to see it for myself. As you know, I was held back because I was waiting to be a potential witness for the defense until I was cut, so I didn't get to see Cooper's testimony. But I'm sure if you were watching John Lamb or Kelly Stewart, and I've been briefed on it, it sounds ridiculous and not at all like anything I've seen or heard myself while I had my own personal experience and visits there. Jason Patrick, she mentioned that he is representing himself and that should have no bearing or influence on whether they find him guilty or not for any of his charges. Let's see here. Outside evidence of or statements from defendants that have been made should not have any bearing, like their online social media, current statements today. If Jason Patrick is posting right now, anything he posts right now should have no bearing on their decision. And it shouldn't be having bearing because you would have to file a motion to enter that and we're done. So, you know. Opinionated testimony, she applied. She said I would apply a caution with that as well. So there was a lot of testimony that had opinions, not facts, that weren't stricken, weren't objected. And with that, she said to apply caution with that, given the weight of the expert. If there was an expert, let's say like a weapons expert or something, so make sure that you apply and give some weight based off the professionalism of the expert that had taken the stand too. So their opinions may have some more weight based off of their expertise, if that makes any sense to you. I'm just giving you an example. And then she addressed the informant situation, gave him some instructions on informants, ownership of the BLM land and federal lands that could be in violation of the Constitution. That was like discussed as well. Adverse possession is not lawful, she was saying. Adverse possession is not lawful on federally owned land. That was brought up, but don't know that to be true because that land's not supposed to be owned at all by the federal government. As we know, the federal government is clearly limited and definitely outside their limitations with not only this specific federal land, which isn't, it's state land for the people, and that needs to still be returned back to the people. So therefore that land is still being unlawfully occupied by the federal government right now. That's the only unlawful occupation I know that's going on. I don't know about you guys, but before the guys went to the refuge or resource center, it was already unlawfully occupied, you guys. And then when they got there, that was the first step in giving it back to the people, to the state. And they were taking many steps in that direction. And that was the first time to see it lawfully occupied. And now it's unlawfully occupied again. Okay, that wasn't discussed in court. I'm just sharing my opinion. It's not my opinion, actually. That's constitutional. And that's the other thing that was bothering me in court. Even some of the defense attorneys, when they speak to the Constitution or speak to the opinions and beliefs of the defendants, they consistently talked about the fact that they held these beliefs. They had a right to these beliefs. Even the prosecution talked about, oh, the government isn't disputing their beliefs and their rights. It's as if the Constitution now is not law. They're undermining it in court, both sides. Not the defendants, of course, themselves, but their defense team, some of them, undermine the Constitution instead of making it right and sound in the law as it applies lawfully, the supreme law of the land. They consistently were undermining it by basically talking about it like it's a belief system, like a freaking religion or something. You know, I believe in God. I have faith in God. The Constitution is a document written to protect we the people, to protect us from a tyrannical government with laws, supreme law of the land. Just reminding you guys. But this court system does not apply that at all. And that's how dumbed down and uneducated most of the general population is. So much so that the actual true law is not being applied in our own court systems that are supposed to be smarter than us. Not looking smart when I go in there at all. You know, I was there at one time too where the doctrination drowned me, and I didn't understand any of these things at one point, but I also didn't go to law school. So there's that. So I think I had more of a right to be stupid than these people in court. They're just stupid, and they went to law school. That's scary. Mr. Knight's closing arguments. That was fun. A ball of fun. So I kind of already touched on the fact that, he spoke to Ammon Bundy, and all the defendants were embracing an ideology. The ideology that he is speaking to, and he did specify it on numerous occasions, is the Constitution. Again, referring to the Constitution as a belief system, an ideology, as if there's a discrepancy there that we all can have the right to disagree on. I don't know about you guys, but that is the final supreme law that we answer to. That's not a belief system. That's not something I hold an ideology to. You know, the ideology that I'm seeing is that this court, this place that decorates themselves like a place of worship, they're the ones with a twisted ideology, and obviously not even sticking to their own laws. So, but Ethan Knight was doing his job and lying quite well, and deceiving. He said in the very beginning of his closing arguments, the 4 defendants that are here today went too far by embracing Ammon Bundy's ideology, and that it was more than a protest. And he has proven that, and he's going to show you the facts. He's going to go over these facts one more time. He said he's going to show facts that show they are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I never saw any of that, so... All right, evidence that show convincingly their guilt. And he said to the jury to apply their common sense also. So he's basically asking them to use their own common sense. Basically, that's detracting them from the law, and convict them based off their own private, individual perception and common sense. Well, we all know how common sense goes in this country these days, so ooh. He kept bringing up common sense, too, several times. So that makes me feel as though he is trying to detract them from what the law says and go to their feelings, their gut feeling. My gut feeling is so-and-so is an informant, so they're guilty. And that's kind of how some of the Patriot community is behaving sometimes. We should stop doing that because, if the government's wrong for doing it, and we know that, we should probably take a look at ourselves. Sorry, just had to throw that in there again, because there's a lot of it. He said that there's an armed takeover at a place of work, and that it impedes people from working because there's an armed takeover. Again, this land belonging to who again, people? We the people. The state of Oregon, more specifically, their people. And that county they do want their lands back. And this land was taken from them unjustifiably many, many years, over decades. Some of it might have been fair and square. Some of the, I talked to Ammon Bundy about that in the beginning. Some of the sales, the purchases and sales that went on were fair and square. People were like, oh, you want to buy my land? You're going to give me how much money? Sure, buy my land. Other people were like, no, I'm staying on my land, and fought it, and then were harassed, and then gave up based off the harassment. Others that withstood the harassment were the ones that were victimized by the federal government, eventually being criminalized. And we have a very good example of what that criminalization looks like with the Hammonds, whom, I must add, are still in prison for the second time for the same charges, now doing more time because the federal government wasn't satisfied with what they did to them the first time. Still a problem. Let's not forget that. Now we just have a bigger problem. And it's good that this happened for the Hammonds because it's really exposing to us and educating us just how far federal government, how sick it is. It's so it's not only sick enough to take your land from you, any of you right now, any of you, if they want it, they're going to tell the BLM or the EPA what to do and how to go get that. They're going to adversely possess your land and criminalize you. That's what's really scary about what's going on out there. But it's so sick that you can't even have your court case. You can't have justice in these court systems. I'm not saying that they for sure won't be acquitted. But in watching the way the system is working and seeing some of the things they perceive as law or not law, and they're saying that they have the defendants have an ideology and a perception that's wrong and twisted, when I know it comes from the factual documents of the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. It's just showing me how sick things are. The fact that they could even think they can get away with saying the things they're saying. And the reason why that upsets me, what they're saying, is because they are in fact undermining the supreme law of the land, the Constitution itself, over and over again. And for some of the defense attorneys to still hold on to their own belief after reviewing the Constitution, having the defendants they've had it, a lot of them have had an education that they've never had before. I've often heard defense attorneys from the first trial, before the first trial happened, and during the hearings. I spent a lot of time with several of the attorneys, and they often told me, I never knew these things. I'm getting a real eye-opening education here myself. This is actually amazing. They really do have a case, a leg to stand on. I never knew this. And, it started out with them being shocked and in awe of things that they didn't know before because they weren't taught before, and they're the educated attorneys. So just something else to think of. Let's see here. Mr. Knight went over, he basically did everything he could to undermine the law. Chain of circumstances that were to be evaluated. Oh, yes. Okay, so he talked about direct and circumstantial evidence, and that it's lawful for the jury to make a decision, even if they have no evidence, because he admits over and over again that they're not going to see a formal agreement or any formal type of agreement, whether it be on video or writing or witnesses, because no one, not even their own informants, ever witnessed, and he's not disputing that, any type of formal agreement for conspiracy to impede federal officials or employees. There's not going to be that. So he said their responsibility is to work with direct and circumstantial evidence as like a chain of circumstances that can be evaluated, and then maybe one circumstantial evidence. And he gave the example. You can have one piece of circumstantial evidence that's connected with another piece of circumstantial evidence, and that will make the equation for apparently fact and now evidence, hard evidence. So to try to evaluate it that way, again, totally undermining everything. Each agreed to conspire with the other person, not in a form. Okay, so he went over how each person may have agreed to conspire with another person not simply by showing up, because he even said a couple times it did take more than just showing up. But when you have call out saying come and support this cause, this protest, and then you come, then you're entering into an agreement based off what your motive or your intent or where it originated from. So Ammon Bundy puts out a call out. Staff Sergeant Mo, I put out call outs. According to Ethan Knight, I'm guilty of this agreement and conspiracy because I put call outs. Go out there. Safety in numbers, folks. Join your brothers and sisters, I said. Stand with them. Even if it's to bring a sign or a flag or whatever you want to do to show support. We need to make noise together. That's what peaceful protesting is about. And I asked for that over and over and over again. So according to Ethan Knight, I am guilty, according to his standards, of some conspiracy, even though I unwillingly or unknowingly entered into what he calls an agreement of conspiracy. And he's calling that criminal. So, he goes over that several times, again, undermining the actual law. And I don't know why he's not stopped from talking like that in court. That's what's just amazing. Just watching him sing this song and dance, and but the thing to focus on is that the jury are seeing what I'm seeing too, and they're given the law to refer to and the evidence to actually refer to, and they're going to see this for themselves as well. That's the big hope, of course. And a lot of people feel that it's still going to go in their favor because we know there just isn't any evidence. And the government itself is not denying that. They're not even disputing that. There's so much so, and this reminds me of another point with Ethan Knight, they don't dispute that their First and Second Amendment rights are not on trial. They don't dispute the fact that they may be right about their concern for the Hammonds and the conduct and activity that went on for the Hammonds is their right. Their beliefs is their right. So he goes on to say that the government's not disputing that the defendants don't have a right to hold these beliefs and show concern and protest that. The government's not disputing that at all. I just keep asking myself, then why are we here? And since we do have a right to dispute the government, or, I'm sorry, correct the government, inform the government of their wrongs. And of course, there is a process behind that, which they did follow. They did exhaust all resources before making a decision. You know what? I think we'll just, go into a place where we can make a hard stand and get some media attention so we can get the Hammonds case out there. And of course, their number one focus was the Hammonds. And I know this from not word of mouth. I know this from directly speaking with them from early on, January 2nd, in the middle of the night. So, over and over again, though, he just continues to talk about how the government, they may have a right to be angry with the government. And the thing he keeps skipping is in the Constitution, when we, the people, are identifying a tyrannical government, there is a course of action in our duty that we are to take. And that action is going to be a lot more radical or adverse than simply filing some paperwork. When you file the paperwork, when you make the phone calls, which they showed evidence of Ammon Bundy, Jason Patrick, and of course, as you know, many of us have made these phone calls on behalf of the Hammonds to have these investigations looked into, to get the unjust conduct in that court against the Hammonds looked into and investigated. Get them released is the bottom line. Get them home. Get everything overturned and give them everything back that they've lost. There's restitution that should be involved in that as well. But anyways, if we have that right to do that, and that is the law as we know it, there shouldn't be a trial right now, and it should not be the last time we ever see this in this nation, because our government is not correcting itself. They're still overstepping, they're still overreaching, and they're still continuously undermining the supreme law of the land. I just feel the need right now at this point in my notes to remind you guys of that. This is far from over. The Hammonds are still in prison. These guys are still dealing with not only the second trial is waiting for hopefully an acquittal tomorrow, but it may not be an acquittal. It could go further. But not only that, remember, they're dealing with the trial without the jury at the same time. And that begins tomorrow as well, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So they're dealing with another trial simultaneously for the same thing. And that shouldn't even be happening. If these are the things that are constantly happening to our people for peacefully protesting, it's setting a precedence that, no, you can't peacefully protest anymore. You can't address your grievances to the government anymore. Otherwise, we will criminalize you and we will put you in prison. So any adverse actions, anything we can see, we perceive as an impediment to our operation, the government, the king, your regime that you're enslaved to, if we perceive it that way, it shall be so, and you will go to jail. Well, there's criminal impediment, and there's non-criminal impediment, and there's non-criminal being lawful impediment, and that is covered under the Constitution, and absolutely everything they did was lawful constitutional impediment. Peaceful protesting. Protesting that's what it's about. There's going to be some form of impediment. Now, I'm not saying go out to the highways and block emergency vehicles and where people can die, innocent people can die. I wouldn't cause something like that, but I think that we can get creative and that we're smart enough people to tell the government to basically F off now without hurting innocent people. And these people hurt no one. They hurt no one. They hurt no one out there. Of course, the government wants you to believe differently. Let's see. I do all that. It was really irritating just listening to Ethan Knight again, by the way. I thought I had just gotten his voice out of my head. He's really loud. He articulates well, but it's a really loud voice, and it sticks with you for like many months after listening to him because it's all negative and it's all deceitful and manipulative. So it sticks with you in like a really negative way. So it's just really hard to listen to him. His closing statements are long and wordy, and so now I'm going to have nightmares. I swear it. I really don't like that man. I'm sure he's just doing his job, right? That's his duty, right, guys? That's what the regime, it's just their job to do and to deceive and manipulate the system to put away innocent people. That's just his job. Just like bad police are just doing their job. Okay. Informants. It's a critical piece of the investigations, by the way. It proves and demonstrates the investigation, he says. Evidence was flatly denying that. Okay, what he was talking about there, trying to look at the next sentence so I can better word this with you guys. The refuge was in and out of control. Why not succeed sooner? Okay. So if the informants were engineering leadership roles, okay, because that was challenged and questioned by the defense, rightfully so, because there were informants there training people. By the way, it wasn't said in these exact words, but as former military, when you are training a group of people, you are their leader. You've just taken a leadership role. When you are put in a position to lead a group of people for security, and they have to answer to you, and you are managing that group of people, you are their leader. You're in a leadership role. And several known informants were in leadership roles, whether it be training or security. I know one of them, Will Coleman, was placed in, by his own admission to me, in writing, in a PM, that he was placed in a leadership role. So I kind of sometimes wish he could have taken the stand, and then I could have testified to that, because their little informant, Will Coleman, was in a leadership role by his own admission. And that was never denied. The guys, they gave him a little tiny leadership role. He was very proud of himself and decided he was going to boss me around too and tell me lies that he wanted me to report to you guys. He wanted me to tell you guys that the lights were all off, the power was off, and everybody's in a panic, and there was chaos and confusion. And that was early on in January when none of that was happening. And he lied for a reason. I don't know what it was, but to stir something up, maybe to try to give me bad information, to reflect poorly on my character, you know. Very possible. But that is what he did, and I have that still in black and white. And I showed you guys, well, no, I didn't show you guys that. Gary Hunt did the article on it, and he showed you guys that. I gave him all the screenshots, so he didn't just write that arbitrarily. That didn't just come out of the sky. Gary Hunt and I sat down and had a really long discussion about my experience. Gary Hunt and I have very long discussions, by the way. Hi, Gary. Our conversations go anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. It's quite fun. All right. Well, basically, in the rest of my notes, I pretty much hit all of that with you guys when it comes to Ethan Knight. So the prosecution defense, or I'm sorry, the defense closing statements were, wow. There were times it was really emotional. I spent so much time on Ethan Knight because I think it's really important to show you guys how corrupt that is and how undermining he is. But I'm going to spend a little less time with the details on the defense because it was just great. And yeah, I may be biased, but it was great. They did stick with the facts. They rebutted Ethan Knight, left and right. There were times they discussed, you know, you really need to understand what reasonable doubt is, and there is a lot of that going on. They talked about their reasons for the Hammonds because the government would have you believe that they were there specifically to impede on government employees. Like there was no other cause. They were just there to purposefully fuck shit up for the government employees. That's all they intended to do. They just wanted to go with guns, just to mess the BLM agents' day up. That's what they would have you believe right now. So the defense spoke to the fact that it was for the Hammonds, and they showed the evidence of all the work they did for the Hammonds prior to making a decision to take a hard stand. All facts, all evidence in writing or video. Replaying some of the video evidence that the prosecution was putting out, the defense was able to replay again and point out another piece of information to look at. Also in the defense that I thought just nailed it, they showed a couple discrepancies. They were asking the jury to really pay attention to the details in the videos and the pictures. One of them being where the guys were doing their first call out from Burns, Oregon before January 2nd in December. And they were asking, hey, come support the Hammonds. Let's rally together. They were making that call out happen. We really, here's your Constitution. They were educating. It was the beginning steps of educating a mass number of people. Why they were there for the Hammonds, what else was going on, that this was a systemic problem throughout the county. And they were speaking to that. It was great to see that video again, by the way, because that video was so extremely inspiring. And they also showed another one where they were on the refuge doing a call out or speaking to, what was going on, an update. It was kind of an update situation and kind of a call out. Right behind them was a vehicle that went right behind them and then parked and then got out and transferred some paperwork or something. But what it turned out to be was a federal mailman going into the refuge to deliver mail, and there were 6 mailboxes behind them on this camera that he was putting mail into, and then he got back in his vehicle and drove away. So he drove up and then he drove away, and nobody impeded him at all. And that's a federal employee. Nobody was even paying attention to him. Let me tell you how unobservant some people were. Some people were up in the tower kissing people. I mean, they're not really, they weren't that observant. They weren't working that hard at it. And that was Darryl Thorn, by the way, him and his girlfriend. There was a photo. We all got a kick out of that. There was a photo that was presented by his defense attorney showing him taking a moment to steal a kiss from his girl up in the tower. Not watching, and nobody was watching. So they were really not overly observant at all. And the observation, as I understood it and experience, was at least just to know, who's coming through, to see if there's harmful intent or not, so they can at least prepare maybe to defend. It's not like they knew exactly what they were going to do. Let me tell you, there was no tactical plan whatsoever. There was just none. There was the hope and desire that if they're attacked, they would like to, they hope that they don't just die on their knees, because it's a wrongful attack like Waco or Ruby Ridge. It would be wrong. So yeah, they were hopeful of that, but that was the most I ever noticed out of them. And the security that was pulled was just to be aware, alert. Not even so much, everybody calls it a defensive posture, but it wasn't very defensive, not a good posture. And as a former soldier, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a good soldier and very strategic and I don't know any better, but it didn't look good to me. It wasn't even a good place to be in the valley because you're already at a disadvantage there, and the cold weather, you're at a disadvantage there. The timing of it was bad. I mean, if they're really planning, they wouldn't even have chosen that time of year. So it's kind of all ridiculous, guys. They really definitely had no advantage whatsoever tactically or in a defense posture. And as far as pulling security, I think it was more along the lines of just knowing the awareness. And one of the points that were brought up is people that contended with them, that the counter protesters that disagreed with them vehemently, like hated them, were coming and going every day, so there's that. I'm going to look real quick at these notes to see if anything in the defense. I'm sure that John Lamb has already been able to speak to you because I had to travel back here. My phone, it's so weird, guys. It is working. You can text me, you can call me there at the courthouse, but I can't do my live Facebook feeds, so that's why you saw me get into the cold rain yesterday. And then the next video was done at a restaurant because at the courthouse steps where Kelly usually does her work and John does his work, and I've done my work in the past, It's not the Facebook Live, specifically just that is not going live. It's not connecting whatsoever on those steps. So that's why I had to go across the street, but then I got rained on. I had to cut it off and then get back to inside court anyway. And then I did the rest of the update at a restaurant because, again, I wasn't connecting. Again, today I wasn't connecting. So I'm back at the hotel now. I'm going to get some rest. I don't see... Well, I see a couple of notes I'd like to talk about. I'm sorry, I was about to say goodbye. Set you all up to who's snoring? Jason Patrick. I don't dare turn he's in the other bed. He's snoring. He fell asleep. That's how boring I am. He totally fell asleep. You need to stop snoring. They can hear you. So, they're asking who is snoring. Okay. So, Lavoie's death was mentioned in a really positive light by the defense team, by the way. And I mean by positive, he was counteracting the prosecution by saying it looks like they have to justify the death of Lavoie, that this could all be a reaction to justify their conduct and behavior, their aggressive tactics against Lavoie, by this, using this trial and taking the narrative of what was a peaceful protest and then elevating it by killing Lavoie and then criminalizing those that also were standing with Lavoie. The government's resources. Oh, another good point that was made from the defense. Okay, so the government has all these resources, seized phones, emails, posts. You know how transparent we all were about everything that was going on. Plans and agreements. Well, if there were plans and agreements of a conspiracy, then in all the evidence that the government has, which I remember thousands and thousands and thousands of pages being discussed, and that during the hearings that the defense team could not get a hold of ever, the government has all these resources to listen in all the ways that they do and follow and monitor, and the drones. Then how is it they have no evidence of an actual agreement and conspiracy, hard evidence? Good point. And how is it that the close permanently sign shows any form of intimidation? The prosecution was trying to enter that into evidence like, oh, there's a closed permanently sign put on the Malheur refuge sign, so that means they're trying to intimidate people. How does putting a sign there mean anything of the sorts? How is perception enter in as evidence? All right. I'm going to end it there, guys. Ethan Knight's rebuttal to the defense closing arguments was even worse, and I was even angrier. If looks can kill, I'd be guilty again, by the way, according to Ethan Knight's standards. But I turned my face for the most part, so I can observe and put up with him. He says, by the way, that if you have any doubt, it's just not reasonable doubt. If you have any doubt at all, he's talking to the jurors, it has to be reasonable doubt. It's not reasonable doubt, though. He says that the conviction will not criminalize any future protests, trying to undermine what the defense closing arguments were stating when they cited that if we set a precedence now to criminalize a peaceful protest, then, very well in the future we'll be setting that precedence for others in the future to lawfully impede, to make their voices heard. And he said, this conviction, if you convict them, this will not cause that at all. He also constantly called them guilty himself. Ethan Knight constantly said, they are guilty. They are guilty. They are guilty. They are guilty. I lost how many times. I lost count. Okay. Thank you guys for sticking with me. Good to see you guys. I'm sorry I wasn't reading all the comments. Again, I just wanted to get the information out to you guys and refamiliarize myself with this. So with that, I have this technical difficulty. So you'll hear my reports as soon as I can get to a place where my phone works fine, but my live update will work better. So just wait for those, but I will be bringing them to you. And tomorrow, don't forget, 9 a.m. I'll be back in court, and that's going to be for the non-jury trial, the bogus trial. Yes, some form of double jeopardy in my mind, but there's some weird advantages that this can give to them if she just simply finds them guilty for appeals. So I'll leave it at that for right now. Sorry I'm looking like completely, my hair and everything's bad. It's the weather, and I don't have time to be getting all pretty for you guys. So suck it up, buttercups. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. You guys take care. Love you much. Bye. Thank you guys. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to get some sleep. All right, good night.